Cisco just very recently announced a networking cloud vision at Cisco Live, your big conference in Las Vegas. Can you tell me a little bit about it and how it differentiates itself from other solutions in the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first and foremost, like the way I would articulate it is a response to what our customers want. The feedback that they're looking for from Cisco, which is really how do you actually, build things in such a way that your technology, your applications, your networks and solutions, they work cohesively together as one. And really a big part of what we're delivering here with the Cisco Networking Cloud is a massive simplification and unification of the experience here. And I think that the way that I think about this is that, when you think about, this idea of the rich portfolio that Cisco has, we have an opportunity to bring and stitch together these different components in a way that we haven't done so in the past. So that way, like we can, drive more consistent automation, drive more consistent analytics, help our customers diagnose issues, faster, so that it doesn't feel like they're, logging into many different, solutions from one company here. And I think the other piece to it is when you think about, what we're announcing here, yes, cloud is, the norm these days, but I think the power of what we have here is simply, the level of, depth that we have with our data, right? The number of customers, the number of networks, the quality of the data that we have to drive, better insights, better analytics, better intelligence here. And I think the other piece to it is with our ecosystem partners, we're able to have partners build on top of our platform so they could extend the capabilities to solve bespoke use cases that may make sense for a given customer, but not broadly. And then I think last but not least, I think it's fair to acknowledge that Cisco as a company, with number one market share in many of our markets, it means that we serve a broad breadth of customers from on-prem to cloud to hybrid. And if you think about what we announced here, we said very clearly that our goal is to help our customers with the Cisco Networking Cloud, whether you're fully on-prem, you're hybrid or fully cloud first, to be able to benefit from the simplification, this unification of our platform here.
Well, not only is the IT infrastructure often a hybrid of companies, you've got a mix of on-prem and you've got a mix of cloud. Now the workplace itself is evolving into a hybrid. COVID hit us like a lead, anvil falling on us in the spring of 2020. And now companies have emerged, but it just seems, you use the word bespoke, that almost every company in every industry is figuring this out, what the future of the workplace is going to look like. Is it going to be back to work? Is it going to be staying at home? Is it going to be a hybrid of some kind? How many days in the office? How many days not? How on earth do you deal with customers coming and telling you these, infinite varieties of workplace solutions that they're working through right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, like hybrid work is something that every company, to your point, is figuring out. But I think it's fair to acknowledge that what it was pre-COVID is not going to be the same going forward. And I think even with the changes in the macroeconomic conditions that are out there, where you do see some employers trying to pull back some of the ability to bring people to the office, people are voting with their feet. And I think that the reality here is that users of these office spaces, whether it is actually the traditional office space or the office of one at home or something in between, I think what they're demanding is a better experience, bar none. And so what IT infrastructure teams need to be able to deliver is a better experience at scale, at global scale here. And oftentimes what this means for them is that security is going to be front and center. It's going to be something where it's not just a centralized architecture. It has to be something that they have to think very judiciously about, no matter where the endpoints, where the people, where the devices are that need to access the applications. And a big part of what these owners of this infrastructure need to be able to do is to do this in a way that makes sense, in a way that is simple for them to manage at scale. So the approach that we're taking here with the Cisco Networking Cloud is really centered around, again, how do we unify that experience? How do we do things like provide single sign-on across our different platforms, so that when you bring these different technology components to support hybrid work, you can do so in a way that makes sense, where you're not, again, logging into these different systems here, that you can understand the policies end to end, where you can see where there may be security risks more readily than it was if it's just bespoke solutions tied together.
Lawrence, coming back to this idea of resilience, as I mentioned in the introduction, in April, we had a Forbes CIO conference called The CIO as Architects of Resilience. And the idea is that as the world is moving beyond the pandemic, it is a different world. We're not returning to the pre-pandemic world. We're returning to a world where you need more than one supply chain. You need multiple options for your supply chains. There are more geopolitical risks. There are more monetary and inflation risks. And so the idea of resilience is that you've got to be able to create contingencies to deal with all of those plans to deal with all of those contingencies without making yourself stiff and bureaucratic. How do you think about resilience? What do your customers ask you about resilience? And what do you think contributes to resilience that works for Cisco Meraki customers?
Yeah, and I think your examples, especially over the past few years, from the headwinds with supply chain, or just changing dynamics with business conditions, like resilience is a topic that is front and center with many of our customers. And I think that the best ones can treat resilience as a business differentiator if they're able to do this well. Oftentimes, when I think about the conversations I have with our customers, they think of resilience as, hey, how do I be more nimble and agile? Whether it's supply chain diversification, as you said, to how do I shift my cloud workloads in a way that I'm leveraging more than one cloud provider. But from an infrastructure perspective, there's this concept of simplicity that we talk about a lot here at Cisco Meraki. And simplicity with our platform can be a core way to enable resiliency, because what we're seeing here is across the board, the way that infrastructures are being built, they're being managed, it's very different than it was in the years past, right? Oftentimes what we see is you have to be able to support employees no matter where they're working, whether it's in a traditional office environment, whether it's in the home or somewhere in between. And so, simplicity of the experience of managing the infrastructure at scale, where you could actually deploy security policies end to end, where you have visibility end to end, that is something that provides a foundation where you can then start, adapting to changes in your business condition. And then this idea of, a platform means that as your, business needs to respond, you can build on top of the platform to solve unique use cases for your business, to, provide greater resiliency. And then from a, people and team perspective, I believe it's also important to invest in, the culture and the people. This is, for many people, a little bit more touchy-feely, but I think it's an important leg of the stool, if you will, for how you build a resilient organization.
Well, let's talk about this new onrush of AI. I mean, AI's concept has been around 50 or 60 years, and there have been false dawns of AI, but this dawn looks real for sure. The internet analyst Mary Meeker told me at a conference a couple of months ago, she's never seen anything come on as fast and scale as rapidly as ChatGPT and other forms of generative AI. And really, when you step back and you look at every significant technology advantage that has come along since silicon chips, has been really an accelerant. It's an accelerant to the underlying metabolism of how fast business can be conducted. So when you think about all of these accelerants that are now in the marketplace, from cloud infrastructure to generative AI to mobility and connectivity everywhere, companies really need to have their act together and be organized around the speed of change. Or if they are not, they're going to find that their lunch is eaten by their competitors or some company they've never heard of. What are you seeing in terms of the sense of urgency that the latest accelerant, generative AI, is bringing to the marketplace? And what are some use cases where you're seeing that companies are sort of proving out early that there are some real advantages, whether it's predictive analytics or machine learning and automation or whatever that happens to be?
Yeah, I think maybe the more crass way to say it is the gold rush is on, and I think that everyone is trying to figure out what this next wave of AI means for them and their business and their customers. I think it's fair to say that from a product development standpoint, there's the internal, like, hey, can we use these tools to increase the productivity of our developers so we can actually get more capabilities out to our customers faster and more efficiently? From a customer standpoint, I think going to back to your point about what are some of the use cases that we can use this technology for, I think of a lot of it, from, our world, it's going to center around like, can we make, this idea of predictive analytics, more powerful than it is today? And I think it's, one of the things I'll say is like, I don't think that, AI in of itself is the end all be all. Like sometimes the right answer, quite frankly, is a better user workflow. But other times, like using technologies like AI and machine learning, it's actually the right set of tools because what is normal in one environment may not be normal in another environment. And having humans and people try to figure that out, that is not the best way to do it. That's where you apply technologies like AI and machine learning techniques to help with that. But I think that, what I'm excited about is seeing the new opportunities around, areas like sustainability and areas like, being able to, create new, businesses out of, these technologies. So, I think it's early days, but I think that, the other piece to it is that privacy is going to be a big part of how customers think about how they use these tools. And I think that's one thing that, as a company like Cisco, we think very deeply about when we introduce these capabilities, that privacy is the front and center. And not, putting our customers at risk here.
One of the reasons Cisco is a trusted brand is that among C-suite executives, particularly CIOs and CTOs, people see Cisco as rock solid and trustworthy and a good partner to have, not only for their own companies, but their own careers. And in thinking about the future of the CIO, one of the theses that we have at Forbes is this idea of the CIO plus, that the CIO plus runs a impeccable button down, no errors or very small level of errors in terms of the IT infrastructure, but they also do three other things. They really understand the finances and operations of a company, and they can go toe to toe with the CFO and speak the language of finance. They understand the revenue levers, what drives revenue, what drives profitability, what drives margin expansion, and all of those things, so that they're a partner there. And then they are a futurist, that when they look at technologies like cloud infrastructure or generative AI, they are looking at it sort of the way a venture capitalist would in organizing a portfolio of future projects. From your perspective, as somebody who's worked with top-level IT people and has served their interests and needs, do you have any comments on the changing nature of the CIO, and how does a CIO or a CTO get to that level where they're a 90th percentile CIO in terms of their ability to really drive transformational change at their company?
Yeah, and I think like if you look at what's happening across the industry, if you are not that transformative CIO and team supporting the business, then quite frankly, you're a cost center. You're something that is necessary, but not strategic. And I think the best CIOs realize that the way that you actually drive real value is to turn your function into something that is strategic for the business here. And I think like oftentimes, like when I think about, even the example that we talked about with hybrid work, we know for a fact that, across the board, we are seeing shrinkage in, office real estate. And an example of this is like, even, across the companies that we work for, everyone's having a conversation about, well, employees want a better experience when they come into the office. They need a reason to gather. So as a CIO and the team supporting that, how do I start working across different teams, whether it's the real estate team, the facilities team, to create that better experience here? What do we need to do differently to make these different technologies that span across multiple teams tied together in a meaningful way that we can actually bring people together? And if you think about this, right, it's like I think of the 330-300 rule, which is like, ultimately, if the utilities in a given space on a per square foot footage is roughly $3. And then for real estate itself, it's like $30, and then for the employees, it's like $300. And so there is this massive like leverage that you get out of having productive employees. Everyone knows this. So like, how do you actually invest in a way to make them more productive? And I think the last piece to it is just like the innovation in terms of being able to respond to the business. When I hear the stories from our customers where they're looking at, hey, I have stores as an example that through the pandemic, were booming, and then after the pandemic, we're not. How do I make sure that I can actually build on the infrastructure I invested in and layer on additional capabilities, whether it's things like cameras and sensors, to help, for example, my leadership team understand the productivity of my store employees better? How do I make sure that I deploy technologies in a way that can drive and support sustainability initiatives? And these are like areas where the really 1% CIOs are helping their businesses transform to meet the needs that they have, whether it's business headwinds that they need to go address, or whether it's net new initiatives to target sustainability net zero as well. So I'm really excited about what these top CIOs are doing within their organizations.
Well, thank you for a very illuminating conversation, Lawrence.
Well, thanks a lot, Rich. I appreciate the time.